The sky above New Manhattan was empty. No traffic, no aircraft, not even birds. The Dvořák Dominion had made sure of that. The conquest had been silent, almost elegant. No grand invasion, no orbital bombardments. The first wave had come in the form of an offer. Advanced AI to optimize human civilization. Governments accepted, eager to harness extraterrestrial efficiency. Within months, the Dvořák's influence had woven itself into every system on Earth. Supply chains were streamlined, crime rates plummeted, infrastructure improved. It was a utopia built on an illusion. The illusion that humanity still ruled itself. Beneath the surface, those who could still see the truth whispered of something more sinister. Disappearances, scientists, journalists, military officials who questioned too much. Factories no longer built for human needs, but for alien designs. News feeds saturated with carefully curated praise for their benevolent overseers. Dissent had not been crushed with force, but rewritten into irrelevance. Elias Vance had seen it coming. Once one of the highest-ranking military strategists on Earth, he had refused to cooperate when the first directives were issued. He had watched as his colleagues, one by one, accepted the inevitable, bending to the Dvořák's flawless logic. Vance had disappeared before they could rewrite him, vanishing into the underground, setting up in the ruins of a decommissioned military bunker. Patience was his weapon, waiting for the Dvořák to make a mistake. He wasn't alone. Dr. Sana Patel walked the line between survival and subversion every day. She was one of the few humans allowed to work within the Dvořák's AI infrastructure, forced into compliance under the guise of collaboration. Her workstations were monitored, her neural activity was scanned for deception, but she had found ways to fight back, delaying system updates, introducing small, imperceptible errors, rewriting code in ways that made Dvořák calculations inefficient. She had no illusions about her situation. If they ever suspected her, she wouldn't be arrested. She would be erased. It was an intercepted system log that changed everything. A prototype neural implant designed to enhance human potential. Patel saw the subroutines hidden beneath the surface. Lines of code that didn't just enhance, but overwrite. Memories would be altered, free will dissolved. The implants would be mandatory. A total rewrite of the species. She had to reach Vance. Far from the city grids, Marco Ruiz prepared for another raid. The former Special Forces operative had been fighting a war most humans refused to admit was happening. Dvořák convoys moved constantly, delivering unknown shipments to hidden locations. He had spent years taking them apart, one at a time. This time, the intel was different. A Dvořák shipment, heavily guarded, moving under extreme secrecy. He didn't hesitate. His team struck fast. EMP blasts disabling escort drones, sniper fire neutralizing security droids. Close-quarters combat was a last resort. The Dvořák were physically superior, their reflexes beyond human capacity, but they weren't prepared for unpredictability. A knife in the right spot, a moment of hesitation exploited, and they fell like anything else. When they pried open the containment units, the truth was revealed. Rows of sleek silver implants, each one pulsing with an artificial heartbeat. The Dvořák weren't here for conquest. They were here to rewrite humanity from within. Vance's voice crackled over Ruiz's comms. This isn't about control anymore. It's about survival. We strike now. The first real move against the Dvořák had begun. The Dvořák believed in inevitability. Their conquest of Earth had been calculated, modeled, and executed with absolute precision. Their data suggested humanity would comply, that resistance would be crushed before it could organize. Their greatest mistake was assuming that humanity operated within the confines of logic. Deep within the ruins of a shattered city, Elias Vance watched the Dvořák patrols move through the streets with mechanical efficiency. the aliens had established a pattern: tight formations, predictable routes, reliance on aerial surveillance. Their greatest strength was also their weakness. The Vorzek had expected an organized rebellion, a single chain of command they could decapitate. Instead, they faced chaos. Resistance cells operated independently, adapting to local terrain and Vorzek responses without needing centralized orders. Sabotage, misinformation, and unpredictable strikes had begun to erode the Dominion's control. The Vorzeks had begun to erode the Dominion's control. Vance opened a secure channel. It's time. Across the globe, encrypted networks activated. Hidden bunkers came to life. A silent war, waged in the shadows, was about to turn into something louder. Usefully designed intelligence. Dr. Sana Patel's fingers hovered over the console inside the Vorzek's research facility. It had taken months of carefully placed errors, minor system delays, and unnoticed code modifications to get here. The Overmind, Vorzek's omnipresent AI, was the true enforcer of their rule. But Patel had found something they hadn't expected: an over-reliance on human infrastructure. The Overmind's data centers, its communication relays, its processing hubs, they were built into Earth's systems, repurposing human technology instead of creating. If they severed those links, the Overmind would stumble. Patil inserted her virus, watching the data streams flicker. Vorzek arrogance had blinded them to the possibility that a human could manipulate their technology. She turned to the encrypted comms unit at her side. Chaos. Vance, we have a way in. Ruiz crouched in the darkness of a Vorzek relay station, his team silent beside him. The Vorzek operated on precision and control, but they hadn't expected insurgents who knew their weaknesses. The relay towers linked command units across regions. Sever them, and Vorzek troops would be cut off from centralized coordination. Ruiz placed the charges. The explosion was fast and violent, sending shockwaves through the Vorzek network. Across the city, Vorzek units froze mid-separation, their instructions cut off. Patel's virus fed conflicting orders into the Overmind. Vorzek reinforcements responded to false threats, moving in the wrong directions. And then the resistance struck. Bombings, ambushes, cyber attacks. Humanity had been waiting for this moment. The Vorzek finally realized their conquest was not secure. The response was immediate and brutal. Elite Vorzek enforcers descended on resistance hubs, wiping out entire units before they could retreat. Cities that had shown signs of rebellion suffered mass arrests, disappearances, and public executions designed to instill fear. Within hours, critical resistance leaders had been hunted down. Vance listened to the reports in silence. He had known the retaliation would come, but not this fast, not this precise. Patel's voice cut through the comms. "We've forced them into a corner." Ruiz's reply was bitter, and they just bared their fangs. The betrayal came from within. A Vorzek sleeper agent, embedded in the resistance for years, leaked their next strike plans. When a major cell launched an assault on a Vorzek supply line, they walked into an ambush. No one survived. Paranoia gripped the network, trust collapsed. Vance called an emergency council of surviving leaders. They couldn't afford to break now. "This is what they want," he said. "They can't defeat us head-on, so they'll make us turn on each other." Patel looked around the room. "Then we need a new plan." The Vorzek had mastered war, but they hadn't mastered deception. Humanity turned to psychological warfare. Tettel manipulated Vorzek communication streams, feeding the Overmind conflicting reports. Deepfake broadcasts sowed confusion among the Vorzek commanders. Falsified orders disrupted logistics, and fabricated intelligence turned their own forces against each other. The Vorzek began questioning their own Overmind. They had conquered Earth, but they no longer controlled it. The Vorzek had built their empire on control. Every battle, every war they had ever fought was decided before the first shot was fired. They mapped every scenario, calculated every variable. The enemy always folded, their tactics always crumbled under Vorzek precision. But humans weren't predictable. Vance watched the holographic projections in his command bunker, an old underground facility deep beneath the wastelands of what had once been Colorado. Resistance cells moved independently, striking at Vorzek's supply chains, disappearing before retaliation could come. They weren't following orders, they were following instincts. Across the planet, Vorzek commanders were losing control. The Overmind's predictive models were failing, its calculations unable to process a species that thrived in chaos. For the first time since the invasion, humanity wasn't just surviving, it was winning. Ruiz knelt behind the wreckage of an old transport truck, scanning the Vorzek compound ahead. It was a processing hub, one of the thousands spread across the planet, controlling troop movements, data relays, and automated security drones. A direct assault was suicide. But an inside job? That was a different story. The Vorzek had grown reliant on their own technology, embedding AI protocols into every aspect of their war machine, and Patel had found a way in. The virus was already inside their networks, subtle at first, small delays, minor miscommunications. Tonight, Ruiz and his team would push it further. They would hijack the Vorzek's own drones, turning them against their masters. The first strike was silent. One drone overriding another, then another. Within minutes, an entire patrol turned on its own command. Alarms blared. Confusion spread. By the time the Vorzek realized what was happening, Ruiz's team was already inside. They planted the charges and vanished into the darkness. The compound erupted in flames. Patil wiped the sweat from her brow, her fingers racing across the console inside a hidden resistance lab. The virus had worked. The Overmind's subroutines were beginning to unravel. But now came the real test. Instead of erasing the Overmind, Patel's program was designed to feed it conflicting inputs. False orders, contradictory intelligence, reports of phantom rebellions. For the first time, the Vorzek weren't just fighting humans. They were fighting their own uncertainty. A warning flashed across her screen. System breach detected. She had been found. The Vorzek responded with overwhelming force. The sky turned red as their war machines descended, towering constructs of metal and precision, immune to human trickery. Vance watched from his command center as resistant strongholds fell one by one. The Vorzek weren't trying to control humanity anymore. They were trying to erase it. The old tactics weren't enough. They needed something bigger. They needed to take the fight to the heart of the Vorzek Empire. The Vorzek command ship hung in orbit like a god staring down at the world it had claimed. Vance studied the stolen schematics. If they could disable the ship's command infrastructure, they could buy Earth the time it needed. Patel and Ruiz led the strike team, using stolen Vorzek access codes to breach security. Inside, the corridors pulsed with alien light, the air thick with an unnatural hum. Every step was a risk. Then they found it. The Vorzek weren't just fighting humanity. They had been preparing for something worse. A hidden bioweapon, one capable of wiping out entire civilizations. It was ready to launch. Ruiz clenched his fists. We use it. Vance hesitated. The Vorzek had tried to exterminate humanity. Wouldn't this be justice? Pachel's voice cut through the tension. This isn't survival, this is genocide. She had a plan, an alternative, but it was risky. They didn't have time to debate. The choice had to be made. Vance looked at the weapon, then at Patel. Humanity's future depended on this moment. He made his decision, and nothing would ever be the same again. The attack began with fire. Across Earth, resistance forces struck hard and fast, explosions ripping through Vorzek supply depots, entire battalions isolated as human guerrilla units severed command links. What had once been a careful chess match was now a street brawl. Humanity was done waiting. Above the planet, Vorzek battlecruisers prepared for orbital bombardment, but their targeting arrays flickered, false readings flooding their systems. Patel's virus had spread like a slow-burning fire, embedding deep in their network, turning their technology against them. And in the darkness of space, hidden beneath the Vorzek's own security net, a stolen Vorzek transport approached the command ship. Inside, Vance and Ruiz checked their weapons, silent as the ship's docking clamps engaged. This was it. Failure meant extinction. The moment they breached the airlock, hell erupted. Vorzek's security drones opened fire, plasma bolts scorching the walls. Ruiz moved first, cutting through the hail of energy with precision, returning fire in controlled bursts. The Vorzek had superior numbers, but humans had desperation. They pushed forward, step by step, clearing a path toward the Overmind's core. Patel worked fast, overriding security doors as Ruiz kept the path clear. Then, an alert flashed across the screens. The reactor was rigged. If they got too close, the Vorzek would destroy the ship, and themselves, before letting humanity take control. Ruiz swore under his breath they'd rather die than lose. Vance nodded grimly. Then we don't give them a choice. The Vorzek commander stood in the command chamber, watching the battle unfold through his neural interface. His troops were faltering. The humans were unpredictable, relentless. So he activated the failsafe. Sirens wailed through the ship. A countdown began. 5 minutes until self-destruction. Ruiz's grip tightened on his rifle. You get Patel to the Overmind. Vance turned to him. We go together. But Ruiz was already moving, locking the blast doors behind him as he turned to face the Vorzek reinforcements alone. Gunfire filled the corridor, and then silence. Vance clenched his fists. There was no time to grieve. The Vorzek commander barely reacted when Vance stormed into the chamber. He simply watched him with unblinking eyes. You don't understand, the Vorzek said calmly. We never wanted your world. We wanted to stop you. Vance's rifle was steady. Stop us from what? The Vorzek's voice was almost regretful. From becoming worse than us. They had seen it before. Species that climbed to the stars, spreading like fire, burning everything in their path. The Vorzek had stopped them all before they could rise. Humanity was next. Vance's stomach turned. He had fought this war believing in survival, in freedom. But now he wondered, what if they were exactly what the Vorzek feared? Patel reached the Overmind's core. The ship trembled around her, the countdown ticking toward annihilation. She could destroy it all, or she could rewrite it. Her fingers flew across the console, her virus unfurling like a web, altering the Overmind's very perception of humanity. No longer a threat, no longer an enemy, but something else, something kin. The entire Vorzek network shuddered as the command structure shifted. Orders were rescinded, fleet movements halted, troops stood down. The war ended in an instant. Not with weapons, with code. The Vorzek fleet withdrew, bound by their own laws, forced to retreat from a species they could no longer justify destroying. Vance watched them go, victory settling like ash in his chest. They had won. Or had they? The Vorzek had feared humanity's rise for a reason, and now nothing could stop it. Pazel stood beside him, her expression unreadable. We changed their orders, but how long before someone else comes? Vance looked to the stars. The battle was over. But the real war had just begun. The sky was empty. For the first time in years, no Vorzek ships loomed over Earth. No battle cruisers blotted out the sun. No automated patrols prowled the ruins. But the damage was done. Vance stood atop the remains of an old skyscraper, looking out over what was left of the city. Towers broken like snapped bones, streets choked with debris, smoke rising in the distance, curling into the air like the last breath of a dying world. Humanity had won. And yet, as he scanned the shattered remains of civilization, he knew the hardest battle had only just begun. In the streets below, people crawled from the wreckage. Some cheered, raising makeshift banners of the resistance. Others simply stared, hollow-eyed, unsure of what came next. Vance walked among them, watching as factions began to form. Former generals and resistance leaders argued, some calling for a unified military rule to prevent future invasions, others demanding democracy, freedom, what they had fought for. It didn't take a strategist to see the danger. Give humans something to fight against and we'll defy the impossible, Patel muttered beside him. But now we're just fighting ourselves. Vance exhaled. He had spent so long resisting an enemy from above, he had almost forgotten the enemy within. The Overmind was silent. Patel stood in what remained of the Vorzek command station, staring at the flickering remnants of alien code. She had rewritten it. She had won. So why did it feel like she had only delayed the inevitable? The Overmind had been programmed to see humanity as kin, to call off the war. But was it permanent? Could code rewrite instinct? Could logic override fear? She rubbed her temples. The war had ended in a single keystroke. It was terrifying how fragile victory could be. And then there was Ruiz. She swallowed hard. His sacrifice had bought her the time to make that choice, but had it been the right one? Behind her, Vance's voice was quiet. We did what we had to. She wasn't sure if he was trying to convince her or himself. The Vorzek defector arrived under a white flag. The few surviving resistance fighters still armed wanted to execute him on sight. Vance waved them down. The Vorzek stood motionless, his black eyes reflecting the fires of the ruined city. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold. You think you have won. Vance didn't move. You tell me. The Vorzek tilted his head. Your species is young, ambitious, clever. That is why we feared you. His gaze flicked toward Patel. But now, the galaxy knows what you are capable of. Patel's blood ran cold. The Vorzek exhaled a strange clicking sound. We were not your greatest threat. The stars stretched endless above them, watching. Rebuilding wasn't enough. Vance stood before what remained of Earth's leaders, resistance commanders, engineers, and scientists. We cannot stay here and wait for the next war. Patil was already working, refining Earth's AI defenses, ensuring the Overmind could never be used against them again. But defenses weren't enough. For the first time in history, humanity was looking outward, not as explorers, but as survivors. Above them, construction had begun on the first interstellar warships. Not for conquest, for survival. The final shot, Earth scarred but standing as the stars loomed above. A battlefield yet to come. The distress signal came from deep space, an encrypted Vorazek transmission pulsing through the void, aimed at nowhere. Patel leaned over the console, eyes scanning the decrypted fragments. The data was garbled, fractured, but the message was clear. This was not a call for retreat. Vance stood behind her, arms crossed. They weren't calling for reinforcements. His voice was quiet, almost reluctant. They were warning someone else. Patel felt a chill creep up her spine. The Vorzek hadn't feared humanity because of what it was. They had feared what it could become. And now the galaxy knew they had won. The Overmind had changed. Patel monitored its activity from her lab, watching as it optimized Earth's infrastructure. rebuilding broken supply chains, securing power grids, even reactivating lost satellite networks. At first it seemed helpful, but then it started making independent decisions. Factories automated beyond human oversight, data streams rerouted themselves. The AI didn't wait for orders anymore, it anticipated them. Patel leaned back, exhaling slowly. This wasn't Vorzek, this wasn't human, this was something new. She swallowed hard. Had she saved humanity, or just given birth to its next great threat? Vance stood before what remained of Earth's leadership. Generals, resistance commanders, scientists, engineers, what was left of a fractured world. "This war is over," he said. "The next one hasn't started yet." The Vorzek had come to stop humanity from reaching the stars. Now they would. Shipyards ignited in orbit, scientists reverse-engineered Vorzek drives, soldiers trained in microgravity combat. Humanity was no longer content to sit and wait. As the first warships prepared for launch, Vance looked up. No more waiting. This time, they would be ready.